All right, ready for a deep dive. We're jumping into Isaiah today, chapters 10 through 12.
Yeah, these chapters are powerful.
Really intense stuff. We're going to look at Assyria, and God's plan, and then there's this whole prophecy about a future king. It's a lot.
Definitely a lot to unpack.
So much to explore, but let's just jump right in. What do you think?
Sounds good.
Okay, so Isaiah right away, he's not messing around. He's talking about Assyria, this huge, brutal empire as God's tool, basically.
Yeah, like a weapon, almost.
Okay.
In Isaiah 10.5-6, God calls them the rod of my anger, the staff he uses for his indignation.
Wow, the rod of my anger, that's heavy.
And knowing how ruthless the Assyrians were, imagine hearing that.
Right, it would have been terrifying.
Isaiah's making a point. He's not being subtle at all. God is using them to deal with Israel's disobedience.
And the imagery he uses, trample them down like mud in the streets, it's pretty vivid.
It's meant to be. Isaiah wanted them to understand this judgment. It's not some abstract idea. It's real.
It's going to happen.
Absolutely, and it would have shaken them to the core.
It's heavy stuff, but there's more to it than just punishment, right? This idea of divine justice is all over these verses.
You're picking up on a key point there. It's not as simple as it might seem at first.
Because honestly, it kind of sounds like God saying, go ahead, Assyria, be brutal.
That's where it gets tricky. What Isaiah is saying is God can use even empires, even ones with their own agendas, to accomplish his purpose.
So Assyria might be thinking they're all powerful, but they're actually part of a bigger plan.
Exactly. Yeah. And that plan, they're fulfilling it whether they realize it or not. It's almost paradoxical judgment through a very flawed human force. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, we see this throughout history, don't we? Terrible things happen, but sometimes good comes out of them.
That's a great observation.
Doesn't make the bad stuff okay, obviously, but it shows that God can work through, I don't know, maybe even because of a mess.
That's a great way to put it. We don't always see the big picture, but God does.
Right, and speaking of big pictures, the Assyrian king, he had a pretty high opinion of himself, didn't he?
He did. Verses 8-14, he's boasting, "Are not my officers all kings?"
He's comparing himself to God, basically.
Yeah, and conquering nations. To him, it's like collecting eggs.
He's completely lost touch with reality.
And Isaiah calls him out on it. Big time. He uses this analogy. He compares the king to like a tool. Yeah, like an axe or a saw, bragging about being better than the person using it.
Oh, I get it. It's like a hammer saying, I built this house, not the carpenter.
Exactly. The point Isaiah is making is all power ultimately comes from God. You might have temporary authority. You might be on top for a while.
That it's not really worse.
Right. And that makes the king's arrogance.
Yeah.
It's almost comical.
It's ridiculous. So Isaiah is saying this king's in for a rude awakening.
Oh, yeah. In verses 16-19, the imagery is pretty intense. He talks about disease, fire, a forest reduced to almost nothing.
That's not subtle.
Nope. But then things take a turn. Right in the middle of all this doom and gloom, Isaiah starts talking about a remnant of Israel.
Okay, a remnant. So some of them will survive.
Not just survive, they'll return to God.
So even in judgment, there's hope.
Exactly. The idea is that even when things seem completely lost, God preserves a faithful core. It's not about the numbers.
It's about who stays true.
Yeah. He compares Israel to, like, all the sand on the seashore.
And then says the remnant will be tiny, like a handful.
Right. It's to show that it doesn't matter how many turn away, God will always have his faithful few.
So this remnant idea, it's about more than just physical survival.
Oh, absolutely. It's about carrying the faith. Even when it feels like the whole world's gone dark, it's a powerful image. It's about resilience, inner strength. Think about your own life. Have you ever had to hold on to hope when things were really tough?
Yeah, I think we all have those moments.
That's what Isaiah is talking about here. That kind of strength, the refusal to give up. It's what makes the remnant special.
Wow. Yeah, I see that. So we've got Assyria as this tool of judgment, this reminder that power is fleeting, and then this glimmer of hope in the remnant.
And that's just the beginning. Because next, Isaiah introduces us to a figure, someone who will emerge from all this chaos.
Okay, who is it?
He calls him a shoot from the stem of Jesse.
Jesse. Wait, wasn't he King David's father?
Exactly. Isaiah's connecting this figure to David's line.
So this isn't just any leader.
No, this is someone special. He's going to be connected to David's legacy, to God's favor.
It's like a new era is about to begin.
And it's not just about lineage. This future leader, he's going to be empowered by the Spirit of the Lord.
Okay, so he's going to be powerful.
Not just powerful. Isaiah lists all these qualities: wisdom, understanding, counsel, strength, knowledge. even the fear of the Lord.
So he's not going to be like the Assyrian king, all bluster and ego.
Not at all. Isaiah is describing someone who's strong, yes, but also wise, compassionate, connected to God. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's almost like, I don't know, the perfect king.
Right. The kind of leader everyone wishes for.
It makes me wonder, how did people react to this? Hearing about this incredible future leader while also facing this terrifying threat from Assyria, it must have been overwhelming.
That's a great question, and one we're going to explore more in the next part of our deep dive.
Ooh, can't wait. But for now, let's keep digging into this prophecy and see where it takes us.
You know, it's really interesting to think about how these people back then, how they must have felt hearing these prophecies, you know? It's like, here's this promise of a king, someone totally different, so much better.
Yeah, I bet it was like a mix of hope and terror, right? On one hand, you've got Assyria about to crush you, and then there's this promise of like peace and justice.
It's a wild combination, isn't it? Facing destruction, but also hearing about this amazing future led by this incredible king,
hmm
it had to be a lot to process.
It really shows you how resilient people are, you know? To be able to hold on to hope when things are that bad, it's amazing.
It is. It's inspiring, really. But let's get back to this king for a minute. Isaiah doesn't just talk about his family or his spirituality. He goes on to describe the world he's going to create, a world of justice, righteousness.
Yeah, he talks about judging fairly, protecting the poor and weak verses 3 through 5. It's like a whole plan for a just society.
It really is. And then he goes even further with these famous verses about the wolf and the lamb, the leopard and the goat.
Oh, yeah, those are beautiful. The lion shall eat straw like the ox. It's such powerful imagery.
It's incredible.
Hmm.
But it's more than just poetry, right? There's a deeper meaning there.
Yeah, what's he really saying with all these animals living together?
He's describing the Messianic age, a time when God's peace and harmony, it just like permeates everything. Even nature is transformed.
So no more predator versus prey. Everyone just gets along.
It's this radical vision of like wholeness, reconciliation. You know, it really challenges how we think about peace, about justice.
It's mind-blowing. But I gotta ask, how do we get there? From where we are now to that kind of world, it seems impossible.
That's the question, isn't it? But Isaiah gives us some clues. Remember that remnant idea we talked about? Well, he goes on to describe those scattered Israelites being gathered back together from everywhere.
From all over the world, he lists all these places: Assyria, Egypt, Pathros, Cush, Elam, even the islands of the sea.
It's a global homecoming, like a huge family reunion.
But it's not just about going back to their land, right?
Right. It's about returning to God, to each other. It's about this unity that goes beyond borders, a unity of faith.
So it's not enough to just dream about a better world. We have to actually work for it, right? Even small things.
I agree. We can be part of that reconciliation in our families, our communities, even online, you know? We can challenge injustice, speak up for those who are marginalized, build bridges between people who seem different.
Yeah, like taking that vision, the wolf and the lamb, and making it real in our own lives.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so interesting. Even though it's ancient, it's incredibly relevant for us today.
Okay, I get that. But honestly, sometimes it's hard to stay hopeful. There's so much division, so much injustice, you know? It can feel overwhelming.
I understand that feeling. But here's the thing. Isaiah is pointing to this future king, this Messiah, who will embody God's peace and justice perfectly. And for those who believe in Jesus, that's where we see this prophecy fulfilled.
So it's not just some future event, it's something God is doing now in the world.
And that's what gives me hope.
Hmm.
We may not see the full vision in our lifetime, but we know God is working towards it. And we can be part of that work.
Okay, so how? How do we actually do that besides the things we already talked about?
Well, one thing that stood out to me about this future king is his humility. Isaiah says he has the fear of the Lord, not like being scared, but recognizing God's greatness and our own limits.
That's a good point. I think sometimes we forget that. We get so caught up in ourselves and our own importance.
Yeah, maybe a little more humility would go a long way towards making the world a better place.
It makes sense. When we approach each other with humility, it's easier to understand each other, to empathize.
That's it. Understanding, empathy, those are the foundation for peace.
So it's not just about what we do out there. It's about our own hearts too, right? Inner peace.
It starts with us, absolutely. We can't create peace in the world if we don't have it ourselves. And that comes from knowing God, trusting Him.
That reminds me of that verse from Isaiah 12. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. It's like a statement of faith, of confidence, even in the face of uncertainty.
It's beautiful. It reminds us that our hope, our security, it comes from God. And when we believe that, we can face anything.
Yeah. It's like we've come full circle, starting with Assyria, this threat of destruction, and ending with this powerful message of hope, of peace and justice under God's chosen king.
And even though that vision isn't fully here yet, we can see glimpses of it in people working for justice and acts of kindness and compassion, those moments that remind us of God's love.
It's not just about waiting for a perfect world. It's about being part of making it happen, being part of God's plan.
I like that. And that's what Isaiah 12 is all about, celebrating God's deliverance, thanking him for his faithfulness. It's pure joy, pure gratitude.
And it's not just about the good things. It's about seeing God's hand even in the tough times.
Exactly. Trusting that he's working it all out, even when we don't understand.
Yeah.
And that trust, it brings a deep joy, a joy that nothing can shake.
You know, I keep thinking about that verse, "Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid." It's like this anthem, for anyone who's ever felt lost or afraid.
It's a reminder that our hope is solid, unshakable. No matter what happens, we have that to hold on to.
It's amazing. As we've been talking, I keep coming back to this idea of the remnant. And I realized maybe we're part of that remnant in a way.
Oh,
I mean, we're talking about this small group, right? The ones who stay faithful even when everything's falling apart.
they're the remnant.
Right. And it just hit me. That's kind of like us today.
Us? How so?
Well, maybe not exile, but the world right now, it's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So much noise, so much pressure to fit in, do what everyone else is doing.
It's easy to lose yourself.
And to lose your faith, it takes effort, to hold on to what you believe.
Yeah, it does.
And to be that Isaiah's remnant in the middle of it all.
I see what you mean. We're surrounded by distractions, different ideas,
Yeah.
people even attacking faith directly.
So yeah, to be a person of faith today, you got to have that same resilience, that commitment.
That willingness to stand up for what you believe, even when it's not popular.
Exactly. And it's not always easy, Sometimes it feels like I'm, I don't know, swimming upstream.
Like you're all alone.
Yeah, my voice doesn't even matter. But then I think about Isaiah and it's like, no, I'm not alone.
There's always that faithful core.
God's always working, even when we can't see it.
It's a powerful thought. That thread of hope running through history.
And even if we feel small, insignificant even, we're still part of something bigger.
God's story. And it's not over yet.
So how do we actually live that out? Being part of the remnant today.
It's got to start on the inside, right? That commitment, that willingness to stand firm.
Even when it's hard.
But it's more than just believing stuff. It's about letting those beliefs change how you act,
How you live.
how you treat people,
Mhm.
your whole life, basically.
So integrity, walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
That's it. And also having the courage to actually speak up, to share your faith.
Even when it's awkward.
Because you never know who might be looking for the same thing you found.
Yeah, that's true. We can get so caught up in our own lives, but we're supposed to be, like light in the darkness.
Exactly. Sharing that hope with a world that needs it so badly.
It's a good reminder. And we're not doing it alone, right? There's the Holy Spirit.
Empowering us.
And there's each other.
Community is so important.
Supporting each other, encouraging each other. That's part of being the remnant too, isn't it?
Absolutely. We need those safe spaces to be honest about doubts, struggles,
To remind each other that God's faithful.
to lift each other up.
And speaking of faithfulness, we can't forget Isaiah 12, right? That song of thanksgiving.
Oh, it's beautiful.
After all that heavy stuff, the judgment, the exile, it's like this explosion of joy.
Pure gratitude.
Yeah.
Isaiah's been through so much, and now he just pours out his heart to God.
It's a good reminder that no matter what we go through, there's always something to be thankful for.
Always.
And it's not just about the good things, it's about seeing God even in the hard times.
Trusting him, even when we don't understand. That kind of trust brings real joy, unshakable joy.
That verse keeps coming back to me. Behold, God is my salvation. I will trust and not be afraid. It's like, I don't know, a lifeline or something.
It is. For anyone who's ever felt lost, afraid, uncertain.
It's a reminder that our hope, it's not based on feelings or circumstances.
It's based on God. And he never changes.
Wow. So we started with judgment and hope, empires rising and falling.
And God's faithfulness through it all.
This thread of the remnant, those who keep believing, who carry the truth, who keep hoping for a better world.
And the question is, will we be part of that remnant? Will we be those people, the ones who make a difference?
That's the challenge, right? To live out what we believe, to be people of integrity, courage, hope.
To be the light in the darkness.
So, to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Isaiah.
We hope it's given you something to think about.
Maybe even inspired you to be part of that faithful remnant, the ones who are working to make the world a little more like the kingdom Isaiah talked about.
A little brighter, a little more just
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.